Well, it's been almost 4 weeks. I'm about 3 days shy or so of meeting my 4 weeks goal. We've got a big weekend coming up, so I decided I'd go ahead and keg my beer tonight. I'm going to run through it fairly quick. I'll try to explain to you the difference between bottling and kegging. I'm going to be kegging because I have a kegerator, and then I'll explain the bottling part later. I've got my keg here. This is the keg I'm going to use. I have my auto siphon set up. Right now it's sitting in a bucket of sanitizer in there. I'm going to take my stuff into my office where I have the beer. I'm not going to move it because once I set it to ferment, I like to leave it there so it can clarify. You don't move it around, whatever. I guess it was 6 days ago, I added my dry hops. All you really have to do that is to take the cap or the plug or bung out of your fermenter, take your hops, your pelletized hops, and you just dump them in the fermenter. That's all there is to dry hopping. Take the stuff in there, and I'll show you the process of kegging, and you'll find that it's much easier than bottling. Sky IPA. It's almost 4 weeks old. Below here you can see I've got my keg, I got my auto siphon. Everything's been sanitized. The keg, I ran it through, put sanitizer in it, shook it up, sanitized it, let it sit a little while. Same thing with the auto siphon. Fermenter should be ready to go. All I have to do is start my auto siphon. Start the siphon, which is really easy with this. That's all there is to it. Okay, while this is siphoning down, I'll quickly run through the bottling process since I'm not going to do it here. If you were doing the bottling process, you would take your carboy and instead of siphoning it into a keg, you would siphon it into your bottling bucket. It's just a food grade 5-gallon bucket. It's got a spigot on the bottom. You'll hook a short length of silicone hose just like this up to that, and then you use a bottle filler. A bottle filler is just a hard plastic tube, and it's got a valve on the bottom, and it's spring loaded, so whenever you get ready to use it, you'll siphon. First you'll make your sugar solution out of your priming sugar. You'll take that, put it on the stove, boil the water, and let it boil for a few minutes. Add your priming sugar, stir it in, and make sure it's all dissolved. Once that's done, you will take it off the heat and let it cool a little bit. Preferably let it cool down to room temperature. I'm not sure that it really matters. You'll dump that into the bucket, and then you'll siphon your fermenter into that. And hopefully you'll get a whirlpool action while it's siphoning in if you can position your hose just right. As it comes in and it kind of has a slight coil to it, it'll whirlpool the fermented beer as it comes in. Once that's done, you'll have your bottle filler hooked up to your bottling bucket, and I find it best to do it over a dishwasher on your kitchen cabinet. Open your dishwasher and let that tube that comes out of the spigot hang down. You take your bottle and you push it up into the bottle filler. It's got that valve at the bottom, and it'll fill the bottle from the bottom up. Once the beer gets into the bottle and it reaches the top, you'll pull it out, and that bottle filler, the mass that it takes up, it creates a perfect headspace for your bottle. So you'll take that, fill your bottle. Once it's done, you'll have a bottle capper. Most people use the wing capper. You'll put your lid on it. Most the caps you get, you'll want to soak those in sanitizer as well. Put the cap on it, use your wing capper, and just cap the bottle. Once that's done, you get all your beer done. You should end up with a little over 2 cases, somewhere around 54, 56 bottles. Most of the time I've found when I've bottled, I usually end up with 48 or so. It just depends on how much beer you actually got out of your batch. I don't know if you can see here, the yeast and true blind is right here. You will lose some beer to that. That's just part of the process. Anyway, once you get your beer all bottled, what you'll do is you'll let it sit. I usually put it in boxes that my bottles come in. You can use 6-pack carriers, whatever. Let it sit at room temperature at least 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, it should be fermented. If you can let it sit 3 weeks or a month, it'll be better. It'll bottle condition. It'll already be carbonated. But don't just bottle it and then the next day try to pop one open. It's not gonna carbonate that way. What happens when it bottle conditions, there's still some suspended yeast in this beer, And that priming sugar you use, it's going to mix in with the beer, so there'll be some additional fermentable sugar in there. And when that suspended yeast gets into the bottle, it'll find that sugar. It's capped, so it'll eat that sugar. And the byproduct of yeast eating sugar is going to be alcohol number one, which we did with the fermentation process. CO2 is the second part. So it will eat that sugar. It won't add much to your alcohol content, but it will create that CO2, and since it's capped off and sealed, it'll create the carbonation for the beer, and that's what's called bottle conditioning. Store that 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. The longer you let it sit, the better it'll be. It'll age well. IPAs are a little different. You'll want to drink them pretty much as soon as they're carbonated, but after that, just put your bottles in your refrigerator, let them cool off, and then they're ready to drink as soon as you pop it. So this is about done. I can see a little bit of hops residue and stuff getting into there. I have the cap on the end of my auto siphon, and it kind of takes out some of the yeast and stuff, keeps it from getting in there, but I'm going to get some hop residue and stuff in there. So this is almost done. You can see the siphon goes in at an angle, so when it gets here to the end, I'm about to have to do it, you'll tilt the carboy up so all that beer will settle to the end that it's in. You can kind of watch the yeast cake, try to keep it away from the end of that auto siphon, and then we'll be on to the next step, which we're almost done. Okay, so we've got our beer siphon in our keg there. I've got my lid here. It has been soaking in sanitizer. I've cleaned it up. I can still see a little bit of keg lube on it. And I've pulled the O-ring off and cleaned it, just taken it and ran around it with a paper towel. This is, most people call it keg lube. I've had this tube for about 2 years. It lasts forever. It's on the label, it says sanitary petrol gel lubricant. It's made by McLaughlin Oil Company. It's a food grade lubricant, and what this does is this O-ring that goes around the lid, you take this keg lube and put it around there and it helps it seal up. So this stuff is really messy, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Basically I just glob some on there, get on there, and then take my fingers and kind of rub it around there, make sure the whole surface is coated. It's almost like a gasket sealer, I guess. You don't want too much on there because it'll end up falling into your beer or squeezing out around, and you'll have a lot to clean up. You just want to make a good uniform coat around it. Once that's done, you want an extra paper towel here ready, of course. Because like I said, it is messy. Put around my lid there, seat it on there, cap this off because I won't be using it again. And that is ready to go. Just want to put your lid on your keg. I know you can't see this, but it's on there. So next thing we got to do is pressurize the keg. Now, why you want to pressurize the keg is that, and one thing I forgot to mention when I was in there siphoning, make sure on your auto siphon that you don't have any oxidation going on. You don't want air bubbles in your line sitting there adding oxygen to the beer as it goes in. So be real careful about that. Watch it. If you have an air bubble, do what you can to fix it. If you don't, you'll have beer end up tasting like cardboard. So what we're going to do here, first of all, we're going to pressurize the keg. I've got a squirt bottle full of sanitizer. I've cleaned out, there's 2 tubes that go in. One is the end tube, which is going to be your CO2 line. It's real short. You can clean that every so often. It's not going to get real dirty, but your outline is what your beer is going to go through. You want to do your best to clean that out. You can get gunk and yeast and hops and stuff build up in that because anything you pull out of the bottom of your keg is going to go up through that line. So make sure you clean those out. Check your O-rings. These things have several O-rings. One is on the lid, which I just showed you. It's going to have O-rings on each post, the in and the out post. I know these are good. I've checked them. They last quite a while, but you still want to kind of inspect them every time you fill your keg. The last thing you want to do is hook your CO2 up to your keg and then realize you have a leak and then drain your whole CO2 bottle, which I have done. So make sure you check those O-rings. So we're going to pressurize this. There isn't much to it. I've got my CO2 turned on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pressurize that, and you can hear that CO2 go in. There's not much headspace in this. There's probably about an inch and a half till the top. I'm not going to show you right now. Basically, you take a spray bottle, spray around these O-rings, make sure everything's sealed up. If it's not, it'll bubble. And I'll do that when I get ready to put this in the fridge. But make sure you check that, because like I said, you don't want to drain your CO2 bottle. I've pressurized it, and what you're going to want to do is there's this, and I showed you this before, the pressure release. You're going to want to purge this 3 times. What that's going to do is you fill the headspace of the keg with CO2. The CO2 is heavier than air, so it'll sink down. You purge this 3 times. Let it fill up, pull the ring, do it 3 times. It's going to push all that oxygen up out, and it's going to let the CO2 in here. So, there's 1. And you can hear when the CO2 stops going in there and it fills up to pressure. There's 2. That's 3. I'm going to let that fill up. I'm going to check these O-rings and make sure they're all sealed up. Now the last thing you're going to have to do to keg, and you can see how easy this is. I've kind of made it seem complicated maybe with the time I've taken to do it and to explain it. Kegging, basically sanitize your keg, siphon your beer in there, seal everything up with your keg lube. You don't have to do that on the post, but make sure you do it on the lid. Once you got it sealed up, purge it 3 times. The next step is to unhook the CO2. You don't need that hooked up. Put your keg in the fridge overnight. Let it cool down to your refrigerator degree or temperature. You want it to be around, it really depends how cold you want your beer. The colder it is, the more CO2 it'll absorb. So I think mine's set on about 43 degrees, 44. So I'll put my keg in there and let it sit overnight. Once it's set overnight, you can put your keg, or you can pull your keg out, hook the CO2 up. I usually do what's called forced carbonating. To do that, you hook the CO2 up, then you crank your regulator up to 30 psi, and then you let it set for about 2 days. Once it's set for 2 days, take your CO2 off, crank your pressure down. You need to look up a carbonation chart. There's different carbonations for different beers. Sweet beers will have a higher carbonation than an IPA, so you can look it up. Usually on IPAs, I'll set it between 10 and 12 psi. And so once you have it forced carbonated, crank the pressure down, set it on 10 to 12 psi, put it in there, and usually in 4 to 5 days it's ready to drink. So that's the fast way of doing it. Kegging a 5-gallon batch of beer, from sanitizing to pressurizing and sealing everything up, usually takes about 15 minutes. It's really fast. And then in 5 days you have your beer ready to drink. Now the benefit of that is if you bottle, you have a lot more equipment to clean. You're going to have 50-something bottles you're going to need to sanitize, and then you have the work of filling each bottle, capping each bottle, and then you have to let it set for 2 to 3 weeks before it's carbonated. Then you got to cool it down for a day, for it to be ready to drink. So from the time you bottle your beer till the time you're able to drink it, and it's really good, you're going to pretty much have to wait a month. With kegging, it will be ready to drink in about 5 days if you want to drink it. Now, it will taste a little green. You do want to let it sit. I usually find that after my beer has been forced carbonated for 5 days, I'll usually taste it and just hold the glass up to the light, see the bubbles, see how well it's carbonated, and then I usually don't touch it again for 3 or 4 days. The flavor will change over time. If you let it sit in the keg for about 2 weeks, it'll start getting really good. And it's kind of like bottling. If you let it sit in the bottle for about a month, it's going to be really good. When you first start out, it's really hard not to just drink it. But anyway, that's all there is to kegging. Easy, it's fast, and here in 5 days we'll give it a shot, see how it is.